I want you to picture a moment you've probably had, standing in front of your bank app, scrolling your transaction list, and one line item makes your stomach drop. You don't even open it yet. You just stare at it like it's going to explain itself. Your thumb hovers over the charge. You're deciding whether to tap in or pretend you didn't see it for one more day. And then you do what adults do. You tap, you confirm, you move money around. That tiny tap transfer has a sting to it, because you can feel you're fixing a problem that shouldn't have happened in the first place. Here's what you'll get out of this: a way to understand why that feeling keeps happening, and a simple set of rules that puts you back in control, without turning your life into spreadsheets and guilt. In a minute, I'm going to show you why the same $100 can feel completely different depending on where it lands first. Now, imagine a massive stadium, biggest game of the year. You're way up in the nosebleed section, and suddenly an announcer screams they're going to airdrop $10 million in brand new currency into the crowd. You look up. Everybody's hands go up. It feels like this could change your life. But then you notice the blimp is hovering right over the VIP boxes. The billionaires, the politicians, the corporate tycoons in the luxury suites, they don't even have to move. They open their suite windows and rake in the cash before it drifts anywhere near you. That's not jealousy, that's physics. And this is the first payoff you need, because it reframes everything. Money isn't neutral. Where it enters matters more than how much there is. When the VIPs are first to touch it, they're first to spend it. They go straight to the high-end concession stand, the luxury box bar, the private merchandise shop, buying real things at the old price. By the time the wind carries a crumpled bill down to your section, the sellers have a problem. They sold out. To restock, they have to pay more. So prices jump. You finally catch your first $100 bill, and the hot dog you used to buy for $5 now costs $15. You didn't get richer. You got diluted. I call that mechanic the sweet window gap. And if that sounds dramatic, here's the quiet, everyday version of it. It's the reason people can look at a paycheck that hasn't changed much and still feel like the treadmill keeps speeding up. So here's a rule. Just one time I'll say it this way, because it's clean. If prices move before your pay does, you're the late receiver. That's not a moral judgment. It's a position on the stadium map. Now let's name the real thing we're talking about, because it's not just a stadium story. Economists have a term for it: the Cantillon Effect. The basic idea is simple. Money moves through the economy like water. It flows from a source, and the people closest to the source get the benefit first. Back in the 18th century, Richard Cantillon described how the people closest to the king, bankers, landowners, merchants supplying the court, got richer when new money entered, while farmers and laborers got squeezed later. Today, the king isn't a person. The source is the central bank. And the new gold isn't a wagon of coins, it's digital credit, quantitative easing, stimulus, liquidity. Whatever label you prefer, the mechanism that matters is the entry point. And here's a trust-safe way to hold it. You don't have to take anyone's word for how it feels. You can verify the timing in your own life. You can watch what gets expensive first and what adjusts last. Because the central bank doesn't drop new money into your checking account like a stadium airdrop into every section equally. The way it enters is higher up. A big injection gets created digitally and used to buy bonds from massive commercial banks and financial institutions. So the earliest receivers aren't the people bagging groceries or clocking in at a job. The earliest receivers are the institutions standing closest to the suite windows.
And when you're early, you get to shop before prices fully adjust. Let me use one concrete example that captures the logic in plain English. Imagine a period where $1 trillion of new credit gets pumped into the banking system. A large investment firm gets access to this fresh capital at near zero interest rates. Being first to touch it, they use it to buy 5,000 single-family homes, big tracts of land, and shares of public companies. They're basically buying 2025 assets with 2025 money, but at 2020 prices, locking in unearned gains because they stood next to the printer. One plain English meaning: being first doesn't just help you buy more, it helps you buy before the sticker changes. Now zoom out and connect that back to your transaction list. If you already own assets, stocks, real estate, things that reprice when money sloshes into markets, the Cantillon effect is your friend. The new money pushes up what you already own. If you're mostly a wage earner, trading time for money, you're living on the lag. As money moves from banks to corporations and only later toward wages, it leaves higher prices behind. So when you feel like you're doing fine on paper, but you're still tense every time you open the app, that tension isn't imaginary. It's the time delay. It can show up as rent, groceries, gas, that subtle sense that the basics take up more space in your month than they used to. And it can feel like a hidden tax because you didn't vote for it and you didn't sign up for it. You just absorb it. Here's the pattern-proof moment I want you to notice. The pain isn't random. It's ordered. Once you notice the order, assets move first, paychecks move later. You start seeing it everywhere. Now, I'm not saying this to make you cynical. If anything, the goal is the opposite, clarity, because clarity gives you options. The mistake I see people make is trying to outsave a currency that's being diluted, keeping most of their progress in cash and hoping discipline wins.
But cash is the bottom of the waterfall. If the water is moving faster than your container is filling, your effort still feels like it's going backward. So we need one clean pass through a plan that changes your position. First, direction. Then, a buffer. Then, visibility. Then, a lock. Direction is simply this. You're not trying to win a debate about the economy. You're trying to protect your purchasing power and stop being the last one to touch the money. That's why the long-term answer in the original Stadium story is not catch more bills. It's change where you're standing. In real life, that means shifting from only being an earner to also being an owner. Not in a flashy way, not in a get-rich-quick way, in the boring way, owning scarce assets that aren't printed at the push of a button. That's why you hear people talk about real estate, broad market index funds, and certain commodities. Whatever your mix is, the concept is the same. When the money supply expands, the things that can't be created instantly tend to reprice. Owning them is how you stop getting quietly diluted. Now, before we talk about visibility and the practical steps, let's handle the first real objection, because a responsible person would raise it. Objection number 1. That sounds nice, but I'm barely making it. Groceries, rent, gas, I don't have extra money to be an owner. I get it. When you're in that place, advice can feel like someone handing you a map while you're already lost. Here's the decision rule I use in that situation, tied to the through-line object. When your transaction list is dominated by necessities, your first job isn't optimization, it's avoiding forced mistakes. That means the next step is a buffer. Buffer doesn't need to be a big heroic number. It's simply the small margin that keeps you from making your worst financial decisions at the worst time. Like putting essentials on expensive credit because a bill hit before you were ready, or selling something you meant to hold because you had no room. The way I like to think about it is, before you try to climb out of the nosebleeds, you stop the free fall. So your buffer rule can be plain. Make sure the next round of basics can clear without you panicking, transferring, and stinging yourself with that tap again and again. That's not exciting. That's the point. Now we move to visibility, because direction without visibility turns into wishful thinking. This is where your transaction list becomes your seed map. And here's a trust-safe proof beat. You can check this today in 2 minutes without believing me. Open your recent transactions and look for the stomach drop category, the line items that create that instant physical reaction. Sometimes it's unfamiliar. Sometimes it's familiar but higher than you expected. Sometimes it's a cluster, 3 small things that landed close together, and suddenly your account feels lighter. The reason this matters is not to shame you. It's because the Cantillon Effect doesn't just live in headlines. It shows up in your month as timing. You can't control the money waterfall, but you can control whether you see the leak early or late. What finally steadies you isn't more discipline, it's being able to see the flow in one place. And now we can pay off the first loop from the beginning, why the same 100 feels different depending on where it lands first. When you catch that 100 late, after prices adjusted, it buys less. When someone catches the new money early, it buys more real stuff before the sticker changes. That's the entire mechanism, scaled up from hot dogs to houses to portfolios. Now let's turn the corner, because this is the moment people usually get stuck. They understand the mechanic, and then they feel trapped inside it. Here's the mid-script loop I promised. How do you change your position without becoming a bank? You do it with a lock, by setting your default so you stop accidentally living like the late receiver. Before that, we need to handle the second objection because it matters. Objection number 2. Okay, but you mentioned fixed rate debt. Debt sounds dangerous. I don't want to get crushed. That's a fair fear. Debt is a tool that can cut both ways. And if you've ever watched a minimum payment barely move while your life feels tight, you don't need a lecture. You need guardrails. Here's the decision rule. Back to the seat lamp. Anytime borrowing would remove your ability to cover the basics, I treat it as the wrong seat for me. The whole point is stability. Fixed-rate debt in an inflationary environment is described as powerful because you're paying back with future dollars that buy less. But none of that is worth it if it turns your month into constant anxiety. So we're going to keep the plan grounded. Direction, buffer, visibility, then lock. Lock is the part that makes the before versus after real. Before lock, you open your app and brace for impact. You get that stomach drop line item. You do the thumb hover dance. You tap transfer and feel the sting. After lock, you don't need to be a hero every week. You reduce decisions, you shrink the number of moments where your emotions are making money choices. And this is where the sweet window gap shows up again. Not as a theory, but as a personal turning point. Because the gap isn't only rich versus poor. It's also default owner versus default cash. If your default is that money sits in cash until you decide what to do, you'll keep getting diluted by hesitation and timing. If your default is that money moves towards ownership when it arrives, within your comfort and your buffer, you stop being last by accident. The goal is boring control, the kind that lets you sleep without bracing for the next surprise charge. Now, near the end, I want you to have exactly one practical exercise you can do without drama. Not a new ideology, just an action that matches what we've talked about. So here's the action segment, and it's intentionally simple. I call it the seat map reset. Start by looking in one place, your transaction list, the same way you'd look at a stadium map and ask, where am I actually sitting? You're looking for three things: the line item that makes your stomach drop, the category that keeps creeping up, and the expenses that hit before you feel ready. Then decide with a calm adult decision. Keep, cut, rename, or adjust. Maybe it stays, but you treat it differently. Maybe it goes. Maybe you keep it, but you stop letting it arrive as a surprise. And then lock one rule that prevents relapse. Set a default so the next time money hits, you don't rely on a perfect mood to do the right thing. You decide once, and you let the rule do the repetitive work. That lock can be as plain as this. When money comes in, you move a portion toward ownership before it turns into accidental spending or idle cash. No heroics, just a default that makes you less vulnerable to timing. Now, I want to bring us back to the stadium one last time, because it makes the payoff feel real. In the old scene, you're in the nosebleeds, waiting for a crumpled bill, watching prices jump, feeling like you got cheated. In the new scene, tomorrow morning or the next time a bill hits, you open your app and you don't brace the same way. You still live in the same world, but you're not confused about what's happening anymore. You see it. You have a buffer so you don't get forced into bad moves. You have visibility so surprises don't stay hidden. And you have a lock so you don't have to win every day with willpower. And that's the real escape from the sweet window gap. You stop asking your future self to be stronger, and you start building a position that isn't automatically late. If you want more calm, long-term money thinking, subscribe to Nhan Academy. What's the one line item that surprised you this month? Before we wrap, I want to make one last thing feel grounded, because it's easy to hear own assets and assume it's just a slogan. In your stadium story, the VIPs didn't win because they were smarter. They won because they were earlier. They were closer to the entry point. They got first crack at real goods before the sticker changed. In your real life, you're not trying to become a VIP. You're trying to stop living like the person who always gets the after price by default. And that's why this isn't a motivational speech. It's a mechanical response to a mechanical reality. Here's a checkable proof you can do without taking anybody's word for it. Open your transaction list and scroll back to a time you remember feeling fine, not rich, just fine. A month where you didn't feel hunted by every bill. Now look at what's different in the list. Not the big headline stuff, the order. You'll see it. When you had even a little margin, you weren't reacting. You weren't making panicked transfers. You weren't getting that tap transfer sting twice in the same week. And when you didn't have margin, the entire month got run by timing. A bill arrives early, you cover it, and the rest of your money becomes a series of defensive moves. That is the late receiver problem shrunk down to your phone screen. Now let's cleanly seal the logic spine so it stays in your head. Direction.
Your target isn't more money someday. It's purchasing power you can actually use without living on a treadmill. Buffer. A small margin so one surprise doesn't force a chain reaction. Visibility. Your transaction list as a seat map, so you're not guessing where your month went. Lock. A default that moves money where it helps you before it gets diluted by timing, prices, and impulse. If you do that one pass, you don't need a second pass. You don't need 5 new frameworks. You don't need to become someone else. You just stop bleeding from the same place. And here's the before versus after contrast that matters. Before, you open the app and you're braced. You're scanning for danger. You see one line item and your stomach drops. Your thumb hovers because you already know what comes next. You move money, you cancel something, you delay something, and it still feels like you're behind.
After, you open the app and you're not scanning for danger. You're checking the seat map. You can still see the charges, but they don't have the same power over you because you already decided how your money moves. You already built a buffer, so you don't get forced into the worst version of yourself. You already created visibility, so the surprise doesn't stay a surprise for 2 weeks. You already installed a lock, so you're not negotiating with yourself at midnight. That's the practical version of moving your seat. And it's worth saying out loud, none of this makes groceries magically cheap again. None of this rewinds housing costs. None of this erases the fact that money flows top down. But it does remove the part where you're the last one to realize what happened. And that's where people start to feel control again. Because when you can see it, you can respond early, before the hot dog is $15. Now, one last reminder of why this is so emotionally heavy for people. When the treadmill speeds up, but your paycheck feels stuck, it can feel like you're doing something wrong as a person. You start blaming your character for a timing problem. You start thinking, if I were more disciplined, this wouldn't happen. But a lot of the pain is structural. It's that money enters at the top, assets reprice early, and wages come last. That doesn't remove your responsibility. It removes your shame. And that's important because shame makes people freeze. Shame makes people avoid their transaction list entirely. Shame makes the stomach drop moment happen later when the damage is bigger. So if you take nothing else, take this. You don't need a perfect brain to win a world built on timing. You need a better position and a calmer default. That's it. If you want more calm, long-term money thinking, subscribe to Nhan Academy. What's the one line item that surprised you this month?